Games, board games. I might be talking about the Indie Game Alliance, but I'm not gonna shout. Here we've got Matt Holden today, who's the main person at the IGA, and we're going to be talking about making some games. We probably won't be name dropping that many names, not because we couldn't, but because that's not so cool. Let's talk about some stuff and try to be less of a fool. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are, 10 a.m. is UK time. Time for Busy Beats and Board Game Bladder, episode 869. And we're going to be talking with Matt, where the Indie Game Alliance, what you do is started off as bringing demonstrators for together with publishers, you work with designers, artists, you work as a distributor, you help people play test. What have I missed?
Oh gosh, we do the demos, we do conventions, we help our members get discounts with manufacturers, fulfillers, stuff like that. We do all kind of stuff. So, how you doing? Good morning.
Good morning. And for those who've never heard of Matt Holden, there's a bit that's running at the bottom of the screen, but what would you really like people to know?
So, gosh, I've been involved in the gaming industry for going on 10 years now. I started off doing demos for another publisher, and I kind of thought about like how would be a great way to do this, and I ended up switching over and trying to work with Brotherwise Games. I was their first employee for 3 days. And we talked about how to how we would get a demo program together, considering they only had one game. So it's like they could demo Boss Monster, and your reward would be, hey, here's another copy of Boss Monster, and that's not exciting if you already have it. So that's kind of how the concept for IGA came about, in terms of how could we get multiple companies to work together, and that from humble beginnings is to where we're at. So over the years, people have asked, do you do this or that, and my response is usually not yet, and then I figure out a way to make it happen.
And
So
that's the key thing, like not yet, because you are always growing and you're always finding ways to do more and more and more. And sometimes I really worry about you because you're just stretching yourself so thin. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, I you're not the first person to tell me that, but I do what I do. um,
As long as you're holding on. And I think this will be exploring all of this. And to the people watching, if you've got any questions, then please ask them along the way. We'll try to do our best to understand. But for myself, I think I don't know how I became aware of the Indie Game Alliance, but it was around when it started, I think, in 2014. And I started doing. Are you actually going to check my account now to see when I joined as a minion?
yes, I
Because
am.
I know that I did a fairly substantial number of demos in a bunch of places, and it's like, cool. I'm short of money. I don't have lots of money at my disposal. Oh, I love games. I'm the kind of person who goes to UK Games Expo, and the first time I ever went, I bought two games. The second time I went, I bought one game, and then the third time I went, I bought zero. And I go there because I'm helped at the time. I was part of the volunteer program for someone else, so it's free accommodation. You even get a little bit of help with the travel and the meals. So yeah, you still need to pay for your holiday, but it's subsidized massively if you do things like that. But then outside of that, I can't. I mean, so I was always buying budget games. That's been my life story for basically most of my life, where it's, yeah, that's costs a fiver. Sure, I'll be more ready to take a punt on it. And you get so many great games that have just been overlooked that way. But with IGA, it's like, hey, you can pick stuff, you can say, okay, I've done these demos of this game that by someone who happens to be an IGA publisher. You get your loot points, and then eventually basically one loot point is $1 of value, and you buy some games that then get shipped over to you. And it's a way that listening to your other interviews, I've realized that as a publisher, I've kind of been a little bit remiss. This is something that I could have taken more opportunity and advantage of, because really mobilizing people to say, yes, please demo my games. And if you do, you will get other publishers' games. That is the core parts of the IGA. Is that fair to say?
I would say so. The whole way it works is, you did a fantastic job summarizing it. Our volunteers go out to a game store, a convention, a school, any public place. They demo the game, and then they fill out a report on our mobile app or on our phone or on their, on our website. And when they do, they say like, I demoed the L deck and I was at Gen Con and I demoed it for four people for an hour and so on. And when they hit submit, they earn loot points for based on the time they spent running that demo. And then you, the publisher, get an email with all that information. So my game just got demoed at Gen Con. I've got a picture. I've got all the stuff that you can share. And then the volunteers then can spend those loot points on our website to acquire new games that other publishers have sent us. And that's how we continue to refresh their collection. It's also how we make sure that we're not just sending out, we have almost 1,100 volunteers. So there's no way that any publisher could support giving us 1,100 games to send to every volunteer. And it would be a waste if you did, because it might not be the right game for a bunch of people. There's some of them might be inactive and not be able to demo right now, and so on. So by providing it this way, it allows people to choose the games they're interested in, and it allows us to assure that the people we're sending games to are people that are actually running demos. We're not going to have a situation where I send a game out and we tell the guy, if you don't demo the game, we're going to make you send it back. But the reality is I can't drive to California to go get the game back from the guy if he doesn't demo it. So this way we can make sure ahead of time that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. And we're going on 9 years of it, so it goes well. Speaking of anniversaries, your 7-year anniversary with IGA is next week. So happy early anniversary. You joined January 13th, 2016.
Okay, that's interesting. So I guess that was, when I think I just signed up. So that was when I joined as a minion?
I think so.
Okay. So In a Bind had been sent off to Gigamic. Yogi still hadn't come out, I think, at that point. So I think I was kind of at I don't really want to promote this even, because I don't want people to get to know this game that's going to be completely rebanded and stuff.
If memory serves, that was about a year and a half after you joined that all that happened. Because you sent us a bunch of decks at the beginning.
Because I think I feel like if it was 2016 in about a week, that would have been before I knew, but there was a contract signed with them a few months later, maybe. But honestly, I just love demoing. I love being with people. I love being with conventions. I did like an entire stream a few days back about all the conventions I'm going to be at in the first few months of this year. So you can go and check that out. And let's just talk about what's a typical day in the life of Matt Holden and what I've been up to in the past couple of days. Let's talk about some recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. So for me, I went off to Friday daytime playtest and I just had a quick look. There were 11 of us, only 6 people who were bringing games. So we got a lot of playtesting done and was great for those of us with games. And these were some of the things that got shown. I'm working on something which was originally designed by Kirsten Lunde called Questable, which that's one problem with the L deck. You see the cards on the table. This doesn't look that different to a lot of other games. And it's not until you actually start playing with the things that you realize, hey, wow, this is totally different. And so it doesn't serve it in photographs, which is why I'm moving towards multiple graphic variations of the L deck. But this is a cooperative, mission-based word game, reminiscent of the Crew, I guess. And Kirsten Lunde did a fantastic job. It won the 2022 design contest, and the core rules are done, but there's all the levels to be worked out. And so having lots of fun doing that. Um, like here, people have made the word lift or rift cooperatively. And some obviously there were lots of other people playing their own games and um, in various stages. It's a lovely place. It's a free place to be in, National Theatre. Anyone can go there. And some of these things look gorgeous, but we always try to encourage people to join in with any state, even if their game was literally just drawn that morning. I mean, heck knows that sometimes I go there that morning, but it was a lovely day. Ended up also hanging around for a couple of hours afterwards, because what we've started doing recently is saying, yeah, let's afterwards play some published games, which is a nice thing. At the end of 10 o'clock until 5 o'clock, we play test, and then that's 7 hours. And then if you've still not got some energy in your people battery, depending on the type of person you are, let's stick around, play some published games, and just chat about stuff. So that was lovely. And after that, yeah, just home and rest, to be honest. How about you, Matt? What have you been up to in the past couple of days?
Well, I'm really excited. I actually was in a car accident a few months ago and broke my leg. So I just finally a few days ago was able to start walking again. So I have a lot of things that I can do now that I couldn't do before. So I'm looking forward to just kind of getting out of the house a little bit again. Other than that, while I've been kicking it here, I've been starting to get into 3D printing. So I expect to make a bazillion game inserts at some point in the near future once I figure out how to do something other than set a fire and make my house smell like burnt plastic. Um, so we're working on that. Games wise, I'm getting into Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice that I got on Kickstarter a while back. And haven't really had a chance to play it because it's I don't know if you've seen the Kickstarter version, but it essentially comes in a coffin.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
if it's a
I
little
mean,
intimidating to
Kickstarter
get
games
into
have
at
just
first.
gotten bigger and bigger, like at their top end.
Like we have a local buy sell trade group here in Orlando on Facebook, and like everybody is selling their full pledge of Marvel United because they're like, I got it and I didn't realize it was a 5 foot tall stack of boxes and I don't know where the heck I'm gonna put it. Um, so it's interesting. It's an interesting trend what's been happening. And I'm a completionist. So for me, like, if I buy a game, if I touch a game, like I've got to have every expansion for it. I've got to have every promo card for it. I mean, it's nuts. I There have been times that I've bought a game, I bought 15 expansions for it, and then I played it and realized I hated it. Um,
Do you ever get something coming into the IGA and thinking, well, I'm going to buy one of those for myself straight away?
Well, one of the cool things about being the founder of IGA and it taking up all my time is that I have infinite loot points.
Hmm.
So basically, anytime a new game comes in, I grab a copy for my collection because my collection is also IGA's collection. And that way, let's say one of our volunteers is going to Strategicon in California, doesn't have a copy of a game, but our member wants it demoed, I can send them my personal copy to run a demo with. And
Hmm.
that way I've always got one, even if we're out of stock. Um, but
So
the side
presumably you've
effect,
got like one separate, I'm going to imagine like it's a separate 5x5 calyx or something for all the, I'm assuming more from your laugh.
15 by 7. Yeah.
A 15 by 7 calyx, wow. And
Yeah.
for all your personal demo copies of the IGA stuff, and then a totally separate collection of all the non-IGA stuff.
So I did that for a long time. I eventually ran out of space and couldn't do it anymore. But it was always fun because I had like one whole wall of Calyx that was IGA, and then I had a smaller wall on the other side that was non-IGA. And my wife and I had this little ceremony we would do where somebody whose game I had would join IGA, and we would like physically take the game off the shelf and carry it over and put it on the other shelf. And there was all this like pomp and circumstance associated with that, like, hey, we get to do this now. And then we would usually end up having to spend an hour rearranging our game room to make it fit. But
It's like that. I knew you before you were working with me, and I guess there's a little bit. There must be a little bit of happiness, extra glee that you kind of already knew this person and you already thought they were cool, and now they've decided to work with you.
so much so, and you know, and vice versa. There's so many people who I started working with who are now my best friends.
Mm.
You know, I had three people that were groomsmen at my wedding. Two of them were IGA members, and the third one was my brother. Um, so you know, that's fantastic. I met nearly every friend I have through IGA. You know, and it's cool because we all have a hobby in common. So you know, it makes it easy to decide what to do when they come over.
I think this is what happens when you have just such an all consuming passion as games can be. But let's step aside from games for just a moment, and hopefully you've come up with something which is a brilliant thing. Brilliant thing. What's a little thing which is brilliant?
Well, it's going to sound a little cliche, but this is the first interview that I have ever done outside the United States with someone. So I think this is pretty brilliant, even though it's
Oh,
5 o'clock in the morning here.
I, I mean, with when you did Board Game Design Lab, was Gabe not so? Gabe was physically in America when you did that.
I thought he was. I mean, it's entirely possible that he wasn't, and I was just wrong.
I
Um,
mean, I thought he was in Honduras or something at that point.
I don't know. I thought he was. I thought he was here. I thought he
But
went to
I mean,
Honduras
he
shortly
was traveling
thereafter.
between the two places. But
Okay, well,
anyway,
maybe it's not, but it's the first one that I knew anyway. So we're gonna.
I think what you're saying is like the ability for technology to connect us transatlantically is like, yeah, it is a brilliant thing. I
It,
agree.
it is pretty freaking cool. You know, I was watching. I was watching a '90s movie with my wife a little while back, and like they were trying to show like the amazing like future, and somebody had a video call with somebody who was like a couple houses down, and everybody at the time was like, "Oh wow, wouldn't that be amazing?" And it's like, yeah, I do that 7 hours a day at work now.
Except they're not just a couple of houses down, they're like on the other side of the world. It is amazing. And I think you're right. We don't just appreciate this enough. And so we it's not the jetpack hoverboard future that we were promised with Back to the Future or whatever necessarily, but it's a pretty cool future regardless. And
Yeah.
frankly, I'm glad that there's not 31 versions of Jaws or however
you,
many
you're
there
not
is.
lying. You know, and frankly, I don't know how any of us would have got through the pandemic without it. So
Hmm. Yes, I mean, I think that it 2020, sorry to bring it slightly down, it made me realize if it wasn't for technology, if it wasn't for modern technology like hospitals and the ability to speak to people and the fact that food's able to get to shops with modern infrastructure, this would be like us being in the Black Plague in the Dark Ages. It would be, and some think we're so blessed for everything.
yep.
But at this point, to a couple of people watching, and I like to ask questionably quick questions. Is the next section? It's not an interrogation. It's just a questionably quick questions section. So, quick rapid fire things. Last game you played,
Marvel Dice Throne.
and who would you recommend it to?
Uh, Basically anyone. It's a really great intro level game. It doesn't require a lot of complexity, difficult. The rules are one sheet. It plays like a chunkier Yahtzee, so it's a really great game to sort of bring people into the hobby, and then sort of from there branch out into other things and sort of get our geek hooks in people.
I like that metaphor. Um, Books or podcasts?
Oh my goodness, that was a questionably quick question. I was taking a drink.
Books or podcasts?
I would say I haven't really done a lot of podcasts, but I was doing a lot of driving the last couple weeks, and I dipped my toe into it for the first time, and kind of got hooked. So now I'm looking for a bunch of podcasts to subscribe to.
Okay,
Um,
so what have you listened to so far? What's been your favorite?
well, I was listening to some news podcasts and stuff at first, um, and now I'm like I said I know that a million people have told me about board game podcasts that are popular, and I just like I said I didn't really pay that much attention because I was like I don't really do podcasts, and now that I do I have to like go find some good ones again. Um, no, don't get me wrong. I love books too, but they're harder to consume in the car.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. I mean, podcasts have anything audio wise, has the ability that you can do it when you're drawing, when you're walking around, when you're cycling, when you're driving. So, yeah, for me, all the way, I listen to so many podcasts on a daily basis. I mean, again, obviously, I did a show, multiple shows all about podcasts, but I would recommend 99% Invisible to you if you like a little bits of science, a little bits of knowledge, and a bit of entertainment all mixed in.
that sounds rad. I'll check it out.
Okay, favorite games, but more interestingly, recommendations of games. Let's say I've got a 10-year-old niece. First language is German, speaks good English, fluent English, but maybe not super loads and isn't much of a gamer. Their parents haven't played many board games with them. What would you recommend?
So I would probably go with something like Dice Throne to start with. You know, I have sort of a collection of games that I've put together um, that that are sort of like each different mechanic with training wheels. So,
Mm-hmm.
like for example, I one of my favorite games is Valeria Card Kingdoms from Daily Magic Games, but that's an awful lot to throw at somebody who isn't used to it, especially because, like I said, I have to have every expansion known to man, and so they're like, "I want to play a game," and it's like, "Hang on a minute, let me go get the big collector's box with the wheels and pull it out onto the table," and they get intimidated. Um, but like I can start them with like a base game of Machi Koro, and once they understand how tableau building works, then it's like okay, now we'll graduate to something like this. Dice Throne is a great introduction to like dice placement games. Um, you can pivot from there into even like roll and writes and stuff once they understand the concept of like I'm trying to roll certain combinations to achieve certain things. um, for worker placement games, I love Underlings of Underwing for that. It's a very very simple worker placement game done by Kevin Balestrini and Alicia Volkman from of the Game Crafter art fame. Um, do a lot with that. I also recently discovered Flamecraft, which is a fantastic
Oh,
worker placement
and
game.
it's so cute.
It really is. Like I bought it for Victoria for my wife. Mostly for the art, and then we played it over Christmas, and it was like so. Uh, so I really like that. I really like you know in a lot of cases for those kinds of recommendations, I like to start with like more mass market stuff you can
Mm-mm.
get like at like a Barnes and Noble or a Target, one of those kind of larger stores, because those games don't generally have the barrier of entry that some of our like crunchy or hobby games do, and it provides a good sort of on ramp to get people into the industry.
Now, the last thing that I would like to ask you as a questionably quick questions is which would you rather have? A meatball-sized duck or a duck-sized meeple?
Um, hmm. I think I would probably say a the duck-sized meeple, um, because I'm relatively certain I would step on the meatball-sized duck,
Mm.
and feel really bad about it. Also, at that size, like my cat's gonna eat it. You just know he is. Um, so a duck-sized meeple I can put up and see it and not have to worry about injuring it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. And as always, at this point, I encourage everyone to comment, ask questions, thumb like, follow, do all of that stuff. And hello to Colin, Fam Games, who has jumped in to ask one question just now, saying, what is the top bit of advice you would give to new designers in order to build awareness around their first game? And I feel like this is something that we could explore for like an hour just by itself. But yeah, what's the key parts?
Well, I suppose it would be a little self-serving to say join the Indie Game Alliance, but
Mm-mm.
the the it all depends on where you are in the process. Because you said designer and not publisher, I'm going to assume that you mean that you haven't published the game yet. You're still working on that the polish of it and everything. And if I'm misinterpreting your question, please clarify it in the comments. So for that, I think one of the important things to do is playtest, playtest, playtest as much as you can. Uh, and playtest in a way that doesn't limit it to just you. So IGA has a service where you can have our people playtest wherever they are. So before the show started, Bez was talking to me about using IGA to playtest some new LDEC games here in the US, while Bez is designing them in the UK. And it's a great way to play test with folks that she might not otherwise have access to. Um, I also recommend getting the game up on a platform like Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia, something like that, because that's another fantastic way of talking about that, that technology over
Mm-mm.
distance that Bez and I were chatting about a minute ago. That kind of stuff is really, really important for sharing games kind of across distances. Um, as you get more into like where you've got the game mostly nailed down, and now it's time to start thinking about a conversation that needs to happen about, do I want to self-publish or do I want to find a publisher? If you want to find a publisher, it's great to go to sort of smaller industry conventions, where publishers will be and be hanging out, but are not as focused on like sales and stuff. So like Gen Con's not a really great show for that, for example, because everybody's just running their butts off trying to sell games. But a show like Board Game Geek Con or Dice Tower Con that are like 4 or 5 thousand attendees, those are shows where publishers can attend and they can actually sit and play games and have time to process it mentally. And those are great ones to try to set up appointments at and do some networking. Um,
I will
IGA
say that as a designer who's planning to self publish, or even if you are planning to pitch, sometimes it's also really good to go to even smaller things. If there's like 50 people in a convention up in the hostel in Conway, and I'm obviously referring to Bastion for those who don't know, a lovely convention. I mean, now you might want to sign up for 2024 or try to get on that list because it's happening in just a couple of weeks and it's obviously sold out. But it's a lovely thing where you shouldn't go just to playtest your game, the whole thing, but you'll be making friends and bring it out, pardon me, once or twice a day and say, hey, this is my thing. Would you like to play it? People are going, yeah. And you'll have known these people, you'll have seen how they react to other games, so you'll have an idea of not just how they react to your game, but also be able to put that into context of everything else. But it also depends on, I will say for myself, I have the luxury of time. I have always been time rich, let's say, since 2014 when I started doing this.
Yeah, and that can't be understated. The value of making connections with people at shows is so much more important than going and saying, okay, well, I got 78 play tests of my game in at this show, or people focus on, they come back from a convention and they take a picture of this big stack of games that they bought at the show. It's like, well, you could have bought most of those games on Amazon, you know. So it's also great to spend those times connecting with people. So the follow up question here about self publishing and do the games need to be professionally printed? No, they don't have to be printed at all. Because we can do play testing off of Tabletop Simulator, Tabletopia. We've play tested games that people sent us on index cards. Now, I will say, having a game professionally prototyped through somebody like the Game Crafter, Print and Play Games, something like that, it makes it easier for us to draw players in because the game just looks sexier on the table. When people come up and we're trying to get their attention, we say, "Hey, do you want to play this?" If it's attractive looking, it makes it easier to get them to invest their time in the game, but it's not a requirement at all.
And yeah, just because I've seen Colin's game and now I know who this is, and your thing is absolutely fine. If you want to get it through the Game Crafter sent directly to the IGA, because Game Crafter to UK is such a big ask. I mean, that's expensive shipping. Whereas Game Crafter to USA, it's not too bad. And so hopefully just send. I'm sure that Matt will be happy to work with you to just get a bunch of copies sent over directly, as many copies as you will realistically be able to get prototypes. And you're always making yourself available, which is really great.
I do my best. Sometimes
I mean,
sometimes
I
I have
don't
to.
want to volunteer your time too much
It,
because.
it This is what I do. Um, you know, I do this because I love it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's crazy that something that consumes this much of my time and is so, it has grown to be what it is in terms of an organization, but it's still a hobby to me. It's still something that I do because I enjoy helping people. Um, I enjoy. I spent my whole life, like from the time I was 8 years old, I knew I wanted to make games for a living, and I devoted a substantial portion of my life to trying to be able to do that. And so I know what it feels like to have this piece of art burning a hole in your heart that you have to get out there and let people see. And I always felt frustrated that it was so hard to do that
Mm-mm.
there, both, I started in video games and it's even harder in some ways to do that. But there's a lot of the same barriers in terms of, like, I don't have an artist, I don't have, all this kind of stuff. um, and so, like, I understand that challenge of, like, I have no mouth and I must speak. And IGA, I feel, is all born of the idea that we want to help people do that. We want to help people get to the place where they can look at their dream sitting on a table and see people that they don't know at a table enjoying it and feel like I did that for them. I gave them that great time that they're having right now. And there's no better feeling in the world. And so every single person that we can help have that feeling is really gratifying to me.
And I think this is such an interesting thing that you're talking about, the passion, because look, I'm a one person designer, artist, self publisher, um, marketer for most of the time that I've been doing this. And it's hard. I mean, I see people who say, "Oh, there's only two of us," or "We're a small team. There's only three of us," and parts of me is kind of envious and thinks, "I wish there were two of me or three of me." And look, I don't mean to take away and say, well, hopefully you do appreciate the other person in your relationship because it's wonderful to have someone bounce ideas with. And for a short time, I did have a friend that I was hiring to come over work for me basically 2 days a week until they had. Anyway, it. I was talking the other day about someone with Hasbro, obviously not an indie company, although we might get to the definition of what defines an indie game in a minute. But talking about Hasbro Pulse and the Hero Quest things that didn't quite fund, and then the whole question of, well, what's going to happen now? And they say, well, that's it, we're not doing it. Because that's the kind of company that Hasbro is. Like, if it doesn't reach their financial target, there's no point in doing it. It's ultimately down to the finances, and that makes perfect sense for them. They're a financially driven company. Any publicly traded company has an obligation to be after the financials. But anyone who is not a publicly traded company, anyone who's doing it off their own back, yes, you want to try and make money. I mean, I have, even if I'm making way more money with Yogi than I'm making with any of my own self published things, I still want to try and make enough income to make it viable, even if it's essentially a hobby right now that allows me to maybe get stuff up to the point where I can pitch it to other people. But I have games on Kickstarter where the funding goal is like 50 quid. And the reason for that is because I know I'm going to do this on a print on demand style. And even if I get to 50 quid, even that tiniest bit of motivation will say, sure, I will send you all the things. And for like a big company, that clearly wouldn't make sense. But it's the difference between having the passion and being parts of a team, working on contracts, and being financially motivated. Do you know what I mean?
I definitely agree. You know, some of the games that you do, that the what's unique about your games in particular is that a lot of them aren't really component heavy. It's very
Mm-mm.
much like, here's like some of them are like almost a postcard, or like the L deck is a great example. Um, you know, and that's to say that not every publisher, most publishers couldn't do that because
Mm-mm.
they have, you can't get that many meeples or that many, whatevers for that amount of money. But while it scales up a little bit, the concept is the same. Um, I see a lot of people who put a super low goal on their Kickstarter because for them, like, if there's 100 copies out there, they feel like they did it. Um, with IGA, obviously it's a little bit different because, like, I don't have a game of my own that I'm putting out there. I'm doing everybody else's games. Um, but for me, like, IGA is just as indie as our members. Like, the only
Mm-mm.
people in IGA is myself and my wife Victoria, and then of course our volunteers. But they pretty much stick to demoing games, and I handle all the admin stuff. Me and Victoria. So so I get the hustle aspect, and with IGA, just like with publishers, I'm not looking to make enough money to get rich doing IGA. I'm looking to make enough money that I can afford to run IGA again next month because I love to do it. Um,
Mm-mm.
and with games, it's a lot about that for a lot of people. Um, you know, a- and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think one of the biggest problems that people have is that they follow it one. They pick one organization that uses Kickstarter as sort of their model, and then they say, like, whatever they did, I have to do because they were successful and I want to be successful too. And that can be really dangerous because you don't know what their goals were. You don't know what their finances were, what their staff level was, and all of those things influence the decisions that you make. And so a decision that made them immensely successful could be disastrous for you, or vice versa, because you have to think about, what is my goal here? Is my goal to get the game in people's hands? Is my goal to make enough money that I can do a second printing or an expansion that I've got in the back of my mind? Is the goal do you want to make games full time for the rest of your life, or do you have one game in your mind that you've been designing since you were a teenager and you want to get it out in the world and then go back to your day job and not think about it anymore? And those are all valid questions. They're all valid ways to be a member of the game industry, and every one of them has a very different approach that you need to take to be successful to do that. Um,
I think, yeah, this is the key thing that I think lots of people miss. That you have to be honest with yourself to say, what is my goal? Because maybe your goal is completely different to Alice's goal, is completely different to my goal, or completely different to Colin's goal, or Yoda's goal. And hello, Yoda, by the way. Thank you for joining us. And I think that I sometimes like to joke to people that although it doesn't quite work anymore with my new beliefs, but I say that there's three important things to making a game. First, you need to do the design and work out the rules. Then you need to do the writing and obviously write the rules and maybe bits on cards. And then you need to get the illustrations and graphic design done. And that's the first bit. And then the second bit is making sure that people are able to buy it, the distribution, the manufacturing, getting it into shops, and then the third bit being the marketing. And the point being that that first bit is something that has so many aspects to it, and it is a lot just that initial creation of the game, getting the files ready to go to print, that it can be so tempting to say, yes, this must be most of it. But now, actually, I don't believe that there's just those three bits. I think that there's the whole fourth bit about the aftercare that's so important that, yeah, sure, sales is kind of part of the making it available and marketing. But I think that having nice tutorial videos so that people, once they've bought the game, they are able to learn it more easily, which doesn't quite, there's like all these extra bits that I'm continue learning about. Oh yeah, that would actually help people once they've bought the game actually then play it, because so many games go unplayed, which is really sad. And it's that's not the end goal to get people to buy the game. The end goal is to get people, from my perspective, is to get people to play it, and then ideally to get them to play it again. And how can people learn it? Well, I'm really lucky that someone volunteered to put Couple, one of the LDEC games, onto Board Game Arena, which is a real challenge. I mean, I couldn't have done that on my own. There's so much programming involved. But once it's there, obviously, more people are going to learn it, especially once it goes public, which I'm going to tie in with the next Kickstarter I do for the LDEC. And there's just so much to do. So let's look at how IGA helps people. I mean, looking at Dice Hospital, I know that Stan's game was there. I played it before Mike Nudd got a chance to look at it. Cesar kind of saw it on the IGA thing, said, oh, this is interesting. I like the idea of medical things, and let's give it a go. And said, okay, there's something here. Let's tweak it, and it's become a very popular game. And that was something that Matt, I mean, it was basically brokered by you. Um,
not. I mean, it was brokered by IGA. It was brokered by our website.
yeah, I mean,
You know,
I
so
say
so
you as in IGA, not you like you physically being there.
sure. I just I was worried you were going to ask me to speak to like some of the details of the conversations that happened, and I
No,
wasn't
no, no,
there for that.
no. I
But
was there for the.
okay, but yeah, one of the great things about the relationships that we have with the publishers that we do is that over time publishers have become to trust me, and you know because I've had conversations with them about how do we make your game better, how do we polish it, how do we make sure we get it from a prototype state to ready to sell. And so if I come to them with a game, or IGA comes to them with a game, and we say, hey, we think this game would be worth looking at, they tend to hear me out, um,
Mm-mm,
because they know I'm not going to show them a game that is like broken, that is not ready to be viewed. They also know that I'm not going to show them a game that doesn't match the kinds of games they want to make. I'm not going to go pitch Twilight Imperium to Haba USA. It's just not going to work. And I know that. Um, and because of that, I've had a lot of success in terms of making connections between a designer and a publisher. And in a lot of cases, those connections have lasted beyond the game that was signed, where that person now, like, all the games they design go through that publisher, or that that designer now works full time for that publisher. Um, so that's always cool when we can do something like that. Um, oof. Yes, I agreed. I agree there, Dutch Yoda. That would, I'm pretty sure I would get a hernia trying to pull that down off a shelf. I had one of our members has a game that has 14 expansions, and he asked me, like, what should we put in the 15th expansion? And my response was wheels. So I don't know how this platform works. Can somebody in the comments tell me? Can y'all still hear me? Okay. Whoop. Looks like we might be having the return of Bez. I wasn't counting on getting promoted to host at any point during the. Hey there's Bez. Welcome back.
Hello. Yeah, this is. Yeah, sorry about this. I need to improve my laptop or get the battery replaced or something, which is going to cost a wee bit. But yeah, it even plugged in. Sometimes it's. Icofam says, I think Bez has gone to get some wheels. But yes, I'm currently on my phone and we'll make sure that that's actually plugged in now just to make sure that doesn't go off. I do apologize for all the disruption. Anyway, we were talk. I was just about to show the screen of all the game seeking publishers. This is something, if you're logged in, you can see, oh, here's a bunch of things. This is something that we might want to consider. If you're a designer, you can put your game up there and you can join at a basic level for free. It feels like there's no reason not to just join at a basic level, right?
Well, we've kind of pivoted toward trying to focus on the two membership levels that we have right now. Um, and the one that I would recommend is if you're just looking to get your game published, by like to pitch it to a publisher, we have a membership plan that's designed for people that do that. And we for that plan we cover membership discounts for prototypes and stuff. We cover consultation, we cover playtesting, and we do that for $10 US a month. And it's less if you do like 3 months in advance. So it's you can get 3 months of playtesting for the cost of dinner somewhere. So we
That's
think that.
incredibly reasonable. But like I meant, if people want to sign on as a demoer, obviously that's not something you pay for. You
Of course
just say,
not.
"Hey, I want to do this," and but we'll talk about the making game side first, I guess, since we're already on that topic.
Okay. So yeah, for game developers, let's say we have two memberships. We have IGA Lite, which is the $10 plan for people who want to be a designer, and to pitch their game to publishers. That covers our playtesting. It covers, like I said, manufacturing of prototypes with our discounts with our partners. It covers consultations with me. So you can, jump on a Zoom with me for an hour and a half and just talk about anything from who should I pitch this to, or how can I clean this up, or development, or help me with my rule book. How do I add a solo mode? All these kinds of questions. And all of that stuff we do for there. And then we have the IGA Pro level, which is where our self-publishers go, people that are going to add like Kickstarter support or GameFound, stuff like that. And that's where you can we'll sell your game for you. We'll do, the worldwide demos. We can put your game in distribution. You get access to many more discounts with things like fulfillment and, mass manufacturing and people that make everything from T-shirts to play mats to you name it. And that runs $30 a month or $25 if you prepay. So we try to be super reasonable with it, because our philosophy is the more expensive we make it, there are companies that could afford it, but as it gets more expensive, the companies who can afford it are also the companies who don't need it.
Yeah.
And we don't want to do that. I'm not
like you want to help the little guy.
Exactly. I'm happy to go demo for Ravensburger, but that's not who we started IGA for.
And that's like kind of a question, because I believe you've got Ravensburger and I believe you've got Gigamic on your member list, who is like, parts of the Hachette conglomerates. I mean, anyone can join. Like if Hasbro wanted to join, presumably they could join.
We would probably draw the line there.
Okay.
So, and in fairness, we've been around 9 years in April. So a lot has happened to our members in that time. And so not everyone who's with IGA was as big as they are when they started with us. And that's our goal. I would love.
Mm-mm.
So, I think one of my prototypical examples, we had a publisher who came to us that had one game. It was a $20 card game in a clamshell box, looked like it could come right off the Game Crafter. It was called Trick or Treat. And he had made, I think, 500 or 1,000 copies of it, and was looking to get that sold. He was really struggling with it. He joined IGA. We helped him out a little bit. He then, took a table at one of our booths at Gen Con to promote a new game that he had signed with a publisher, which he called Trove. And that was going really well. And then after the Kickstarter, he decided to rename it to Vast. And that's how Letter Games really sort of launched. And I'm not saying you're trying to say like Letter Games and all of its success exists because of us or anything like that. But the point being, somebody might look at Letter and be like, oh, those guys are pretty big now. And is that too big for IGA? Well, they weren't when they started. They, and
Can I ask, was it Cole or was it Patrick who joined, or was it both of them?
Both. I believe they actually met through IGA, much like what you were talking about with Dice Hospital. I honestly don't remember, but I'm pretty sure that it was. But I know that Cole had signed up to have us look at Trove before Patrick signed it. That I know for sure. Actually, no, it wasn't Cole. It was Dave Somerville. Cole came in with Root. Dave was the original designer, and then Cole was the artist.
No, the artist is Kyle Ferrin.
Is it? Yeah, that's right. You got to remember, it's 5 o'clock in the morning here.
Yeah, and you've worked with a lot of peoples, and you don't have all your notes available.
It's thousands of people, and I'm bad with names anyway. So
the point is taken, that people grow, and like I feel like honestly, yeah, Gigamic being parts of having been bought out by Hachette, and feels, even though I'm biased towards Gigamic, and I love the fact that they're part of IGA, and I can tell other people, well, if you are demoing Yogi, then go and sign up. Um, but yeah, let's actually talk about the demoing for a moment because I've not done it as much as I could for sure. Like in my, I mean, I don't send as many emails as I probably should. Yeah, really want to aim for one a month, and instead I do maybe four a year. I don't know. And I could remind people, hey, you got this. Why not sign up and demo stuff? But why do you think there's a reluctance to sign up and log on games that you've demoed? Is it just the that people don't want to do the work? Is there something more? Like, how can we as publishers encourage people to do that? Because it, for me, yes, it's a great proposition saying to people, hey, demo this game and other publishers games will come to you. It's win-win-win. Like win for me because my stuff gets demoed, as you say, win for the next publisher because their stuff's probably going to get demoed once they get into demoing the stuff, and win for the person demoing because they get free games.
So, when we talk about IGA, a lot of people think IGA is a service company where you pay us money and we provide services like we're Netflix. And I try really hard to sort of change the narrative around that a little bit. IGA is a guild, and we don't mean that in sort of the World of Warcraft sense that that name has taken on. We're a guild in the old school sense, where we're a bunch of artisans who are coming together to pool our resources to make everybody more successful. That's what we're here for. And what you just said, where I should recruit volunteers because not only will it help me, but it'll help other IGA members. Like, if I could bottle that, that is the essence of what IGA is supposed to be. Is that you care not just about how it benefits you, but how it benefits your fellow members on another continent somewhere. Um, you know, if if just about every game publisher has, let's say, five hardcore fans, and some of them have way more. But if we say that everybody has five hardcore fans, we have 1,807 members of IGA. If everybody sent us those five people, we would be at over 7,000 demo volunteers. We're over 1,000, which is not too shabby by any means, but that shows you the disparity in terms of that folks aren't thinking about.
Like
you know
folks aren't using it as a, and even without looking at the benefit for other people, like I say, it is a win for myself. It's not like I'm doing this purely as a selfless act. It is partially a selfish act. I'm not going to lie about that.
no,
Yes, I want
nor
my
should
game
you.
to be demoed more, and um, Colin, I understand you've got to do work. This is going to obviously stay up on YouTube and you can watch the rest afterwards. Lots of love and have a good day. But yeah, how it sounds like publisher there's fewer um, demos signed up than publishers. Is that right?
It is, you know but what we find is that the demo reps that sign up, a lot of them tend to be more active. We have a lot of people who sign up, who are a designer, and they're sort of like curious about IGA. And then a lot of them get busy and don't work on the game as much. They don't, they've published their one game that design that they had, and now they're kind of done. There's a lot of that stuff. Whereas our demo reps, because they're constantly getting stuff that's new and fresh, it's easy to keep them engaged. We did lose a bunch of them over COVID and stuff, people that just didn't feel comfortable going out into stores anymore and stuff like that. But just like everybody else in the industry, we're working on rebuilding that after. Um, so, you know, but like what you said about, having a wanting to the people who love your stuff to promote your stuff, and that it's selfish too. Like, one of the things I always tell members is that it's a fantastic thing to talk about IGA in a Kickstarter update after you've delivered the game, because now they've got it, they're passionate about it, they're playing it, they love it. And the great thing about it is they cost you even less as demo reps because you don't have to give them a free copy of the game. They already paid for it. So you can just be like, hey, if
Mm.
you love our game, sign up for this website right over here, and you can go teach people in a store, which you might be doing anyway, just because you like the game. Um, do that, and you can get extra stuff. We have lots of people who get. I've got members here that get $300, $400, $500 worth of games a month because they run so many demos. And most of us, if it's like, hey, I'm going to spend $500 a month on board games, like they end up getting divorced. But my issue is I get that many games and I don't know where I'm going to store them.
Well, I kind of assume you've got a bit of a warehouse for IGA stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm talking about like the games that are in like my/IGA's collection, where I have like one of each game. I have like 2,100 games in my living room. It's absurd.
Yeah. So, yeah, let's talk a bit more about demoing. So you started off. I mean, I don't know if we can talk about Dave Arneson because I wanted to hear some of these Dave Arneson stories that you kind of
Oh man,
teased.
I could talk about Dave all day. He
So, no,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Give us your one. Give us one quick Dave Arneson story, and then we'll talk about your journey through Steve Jackson and Brotherwise and IGA and what demoing is all about.
Sure.
Well,
So Dave, if anybody doesn't know, Dave was the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons with Gary Gygax. Basically, Gary did the world and the sort of the role playing aspect, and Dave was kind of the math guy behind a lot of it. Dave always used to tell me this fun story about how what we now know as the standard polyhedral dice set came to be. Um, Dave had seen a 20-sided die at a pub game in the UK when he was in the armed services. I think it was the Navy. And he knew that he wanted something a little more robust than a D6, and he remembered this die. And the only place, because the original white box D&D was what they were assembling them in Gary's house. And so they were getting all the parts individually and putting them in a box together, not unlike what some of our members do now. And
proper indie stuff.
exactly. And the only place they could find that sold a 20-sided polyhedron was this company. It was an educational company out in California that made what we now know to be the polyhedral dice set, and they made it with the intent of teaching children about geometry. And
Oh,
so they would be like, schools would buy them to be like, look, this is a pyramid, this is a cube, this is a
so would they have
dodecahedron.
numbers on them?
They did, because they were trying to illustrate like how many sides were there. And so the original white box set only came with a D6 and a D20. And so what Dave said they were doing is basically opening the packages, putting the 6 and the 20 in the box, and throwing the rest away. And then what happened, because this was in Gary's house, his living space, he wouldn't wear shoes. And so he'd be walking around the house and he kept stepping on four-sided die that they were trying to get rid of. And he went to Dave and said, I don't care what you have to do. Make it so we can throw the whole pack in the box. And if you look at like the original, like first edition D&D, you'll note that the 20 and the 6 are used way more than the 4, the 8, the 12, the 10. And that was because Dave just picked some spots where he could change it so they could throw the whole pack of dice in the box. So if Gary Gygax liked wearing shoes, your dice set would look very different today.
Well, I mean, I would have imagined that would also come just from a cost perspective, because why are you trying to get rid of these things if you're buying them as a set? Surely that would be the thing. Well, I'm buying this as a set. It basically costs me no more to include these three other dice. I might as well do something with these three dice to give them some value so people feel like they're getting more value in the game.
Well, see, that's what happens. We talked about the different steps of making a game, and we talked about like we design a game and then we try to figure out how to turn that game into a product. Sometimes you have to have those thoughts kind of in reverse order because they designed the whole game around a 6 and a 20 sided die and play tested it for ages. And then when they started to actually think about how are we going to put it in a box, that's when they ran into this. If they had known at the beginning we can only get it in a set, then they probably would have designed it that way, and there would have been all the dice in there from the beginning.
I
Um,
guess what I'm saying is, and I hate to be slightly pedantic about this, is that even if Gary Gygax enjoyed wearing shoes and hadn't been hurting their feet on the D4s, they probably would have at some point realized, hey, wait a minute, we've got several hundred of each of these. That's value that we're just missing. I put them in the boxes.
and maybe that conversation happened in 1977. I don't know.
But I
Um,
love the story anyway. I mean, can you share one more highlight of your tutelage from Dave Arneson, who at the time you were being taught video games and they were just showing you the love of general analog non-digital games?
so so a little background on this. I went to a college called Full Sail here in Orlando, and it's a video game design college. Like I said, that's where I started my whole journey in games. And it was very heavily programming focused. It was all, every class was about here's how you make graphic shaders and here's how you do collision detection and all these sorts of things. And Dave Arneson was an instructor there, and his role there. I also worked with Dustin Klingman, who's been involved in some of the more recent Blackmore stuff. They actually met at Full Sail, if memory serves. Um, and what Dave's class was called Rules of the Game. And the idea was it was the only class we had in our whole curriculum that was designed to teach us how to make games that were fun and not just functional. Um, and so Dave, in his obvious bias toward tabletop games, he chose to use that medium to engage us in, in games that where we could put the programming part completely out of our mind and just focus on what makes a game fun, what makes a game fair. And so
Mm-mm.
he taught us, and you got to remember this is 2004, so we didn't have access to a lot of what we have now. But he taught us Munchkin, he taught us Catan, and he taught us a game from Buffalo called Nuclear War. Um, and that was really my introduction to modern tabletop gaming, where I learned it wasn't just Monopoly. Um, and Dave, he was so down to earth that you would forget who you were talking to. And then he would smack you upside the head with it when you were least expecting it. So there's like he he would tell a story about he was talking about the history of gaming, and he was talking about like, oh, it started with these games, and then we got into like Monopoly and stuff like this. And then he said, and I mean, he's standing there, he was unassuming. Like, imagine if Santa Claus went through a really bitter divorce, and that's what it was like hanging
Mm-mm.
out with Dave Arneson. Um, but he, at one point, he was like, "Yeah, this was the highest selling game of all time for a while." And then he didn't say anything else. He just did this, and you could tell what he was saying, and that yeah, it was the highest selling game until D&D. And at that moment, like you went from like, oh, I'm hearing a lecture about history that I'm taking notes on to, holy crap, I'm in a room with Dave Arneson right now, you know, and it kind of, it was always fun to have that like wild pivot. He would tell us, he told us stories about like the first Gen Con that Magic the Gathering was at, or the time that he was giving advice to Will Wright about making SimCity and The Sims, those kinds of things. It was really interesting to kind of hear about the industry from someone who was there at the beginning. It would be like learning computer programming from Steve Jobs and Bill Gates. Um, so it was interesting. He was a special guy.
I mean, it sounds like a great education, a great start to everything. And it was, I believe, having played Munchkin with Dave Arneson that led you to then become what's called the Men in Black, the Steve Jackson demo team.
Yep. So after that had happened, I graduated from Full Sail in 2004, and I thought, well, I've got my shiny new degree, and now everyone in the game industry is going to fall at my feet and give me whatever I want. And not so much. It turns out there really weren't any game companies in Florida, and at the time, my mother was very sick, and I couldn't leave town, so I wasn't able to get into the video game industry right away. And I ended up taking some more like mundane programming jobs, and I found myself getting really depressed because like games were such a passion of mine, and I invested all this time and energy into knowing how to do games. And I said, I've got to get into the game industry somehow, some way. And
Mm-mm-mm.
I was looking at my copy of Munchkin that I had, and it had an ad in there to join the Men in Black program. And I was like, well, here's a way that I can engage with games again, even if I can't get a job doing it. And so I signed up for that. I met Steve at a Gen Con shortly thereafter. Um, and that was sort of my introduction to how all of this works. And so I learned from the Men in Black program a lot of things about how these programs are assembled, areas where things worked really well, areas where maybe things could have worked a little different or a little better. Um, and then, over time, I kind of wanted to pivot into something, that was a little less structured, to say maybe. And so I looked at my game shelf and I said, I need to find something else to try to demo. And I had a little box all the way at the back of my game shelf that I bought from two guys that I met. Literally, they weren't even in the vendor hall. They gave them a table like in the hallway at Gen Con 2013, which was Boss Monster. And so I reached out to them and I said, hi guys, I'd like to join your demo program. And Johnny O'Neill responded and said, we don't have a demo program. And then I replied back and said, hi, I'd like to start your demo program. Um, and we had this whole process we went through. Like they called my references. It was a whole thing. And we started talking about like how would we build this. And like I said at the beginning, we ran into an issue of how are we going to reward people. And so I said to them, well, if we could get 5 companies together and you could demo company A's game to earn company B's, and then company B could have recruit their people and they could demo A and C and D and so on around the circle, that we could, sort of pool our fans and our games and our talents together to be greater than the sum of its parts. And the intent was that Brotherwise was going to own that and be the hub of that. And Johnny and Chris talked about it, and they said that they would rather use that service than own that service. And so I left Brotherwise and founded IGA. And they
And you
were
left it after 3 days.
after 3. I think it might have been 4, but it was less than a week. Um, um, the quickest I've ever left a company, by the way.
But
And
on good terms, which is,
yeah, on fantastic terms. We still love those guys. 9 years later.
are they basically, would you say, IGA's biggest customer in terms of like the number of demos and stuff?
In terms of number of demos, if they're not the highest, they're probably pretty close. Um, they got a pretty big head start because they were, member number one. Um, but like the next 2 members that joined were Doug Lewandowski, who at the time I don't think had published any games yet, and he was setting up the Kickstarter for Gothic Doctor. He was member number
Oh,
2,
yes.
and then Ignacy at Portal was number 3. And so I kind of figured like we had Boss Monster in the middle, that was the indie publisher that had one successful game. And then we had Doug as the just getting started and Portal as the company everybody knew. And that sort of defined the window of what our customer base was going to be. um, right off the bat, like within the first 3 days. um, so and Johnny told me at the time, if you can get 5 members to join this, I think it'll be successful. And so every now and again, I'll troll him and I'll be like, "Hey, Johnny, you said 5. We're at 1,800. How are we doing?"
And like you had, I think you said like 63 before you went to like the next convention, which was just a few weeks later.
It was a few months. We started April 25th, and then we went to Gen Con. We didn't have a booth the first year. We had a couple of demo tables out in the game hall, and they put us like right next to the bathroom. Um, and so
Not
like
the worst place to be. I mean, it's smelly, but at least you get visibility.
well
People
that
need
was
to go to the bathroom.
well, and what was cool about it is they put us in front of the ladies' room. And so what would happen is there would be a lot of groups that were together, and so one or two members of the group would go into the restroom, and I would sort of corral the other 4 people that were waiting for them to come out and say like, "Hey, come here and look at this," and I would get a couple sentences into the demo by the time the other people would come out, and by that point the hooks are in, and they would all sit down and play a game, and it was really successful. And my intent had been to launch IGA sort of at that event. Um, but the few members that we had signed up in the beginning and the few minions that we signed up in the beginning. So like Ken Grazier is a phenomenal friend of mine. And he's like, I mean, his name on every platform there is Demo Ken. He's that guy. Um,
Yes.
and he probably brought us a dozen members by himself in like the first month. Um, and so what kind of happened is for the first year and a half of IGA, it was kind of like the baby carriage was rolling down the mountain and I was running trying to catch up to it because I wasn't ready to do all the work for all these people by myself. We didn't have anything automated yet. Like for the first 2 years, our website was the mock-up that I put up for Brotherwise to show them what I was thinking about doing. And so everything that was planned to be automated was just me running around like an idiot behind the scenes trying to make it happen.
Like sending out all those emails and
Oh yeah.
putting everything into forms and
There was no demo reporting then. People were sending me emails and I was calculating what I owed them, and they would email me and tell me what games they won, and I would go put it in a box, and there wasn't any inventory control. It was just like, "Do you have that? I don't know. Let me walk out in the
and
garage and
that's
check."
kind of the problem of being an indie company. I mean, like the same way that a lot of the publishers you serve and yourself are, when you are kind of swept off the feet and you're so embroiled in the day-to-day minutiae of what you need to do just to make it to tomorrow, just to keep people happy, you don't have the time to set up the big sweeping changes that you really have to in order to get it ready for next year.
And that's kind of the boat that I find myself in right now with IGA, because you know when because we do so much for so many people, and because our service is inexpensive, and the plan is that we make our money by getting a little bit of money from a lot of people rather than a lot of money from a few. um, so that counts on us being able to do things in an automated way. And so part of what makes IGA as successful as it is the fact that I do have a software development mindset. And so
Mm-mm.
I can think about, how do I take this thing that's hard and make it where a series of online tools can simplify the process. And then, and that's how we sort of compress a lot of work into a little bit of time. Um, and I spent, like I said, we were using the mock-up website for the first 2 years, and I eventually got the final website done, what we have today. Um, and now I'm in the process of rebuilding it again. And we're going to launch IGA 3.0. And that's going to have, it's going to do a much better job of integrating the services that we currently have, because When we designed the demo program in 2014, we didn't have the distribution program that we added in 2021. And, so now that we have all these things, we can sort of zoom out and then figure out how we can better snap them together and make them work as a cohesive set of things. But also, we have a bunch of new ideas of new stuff we want IGA to do. And that can be tough when we don't have time to automate it. So I'm working on doing that. But now, instead of having 60 companies that I'm trying to keep track of by hand, we're at this massive number. And it makes it very tough for me to find time to say, like, okay, now I can put down support emails and actually go code for a little while. Um, but part of what IGA exists for, it always drives me mad when people tell me, well, I signed up for IGA, but I didn't really have the time to look at it because I was so busy. And it's like, well, but if you had, look at all the things you wouldn't have had to do because we could have helped you. um, so it's the rare time investment that pays itself back in time, for publishers.
It is, and for sure, before we move totally away from the demoing, and I know we could talk for like an hour about your experience with demoing and why demoing is valuable. I want to talk about like the international shipping involved specifically for IGA, because that's kind of got to be a bugbear and it's got to be a difficult point. Because I know for me, and this is not your fault, this is entirely down to Royal Mail and everything. Like something got posted from you to me, and then like a big box, and then it got held up in customs, and then eventually it's like, hey, wait a minute, I need to sort this out. And then I was too late, and that was kind of partially my fault and partially the UK postal government, being jerks. But then it got sent back, and that's obviously not great. Yeah, and then yeah, how do you make international it work internationally, where you have to post the rewards to people in other countries?
It's not easy. Really, I mean, let me rephrase that. It's not hard. It's expensive. Um, it. I'm. We have demo reps all over the world, but I would say probably 80% of them are active in the U.S. and Canada, which makes it a little easier for us. We have had a few discussions, in the same way that our members, uh, have a fulfillment center in Europe if they're based over here or something. We've talked to people about doing that too. Um, the reason we haven't is because our stock changes all the time. So,
Mm-mm-mm.
you know, it would be really difficult if you as a publisher, if you said I want to join IGA and I would tell you, okay, send 50 games here, 30 games there, and that would be really convoluted for you. And if we did it, it would be very expensive for us to turn around and do these mass shipments of games when we might never have somebody in Europe that's interested in game X or Y, for whatever reason. So logistically, it became a challenge. It's also why we've never done a sales convention in Europe. And that's something that I want to change. It's just the one downside of us having uh, running at the small costs that we do is that it makes it very hard to find money to grow for things like that. So right now, if we have an international a minion that wants a box of games, like I go on pirate ship like everybody else and throw it in a box and ship it and pay $70-$80 to send people 4 games. And that hurts us financially when it happens, but it's so worth it to us because you know the it never fails. Like every time I send a game to somebody, uh 3 weeks later I'll get an email from a publisher and they're like, dude, I made 500 games in Florida, how the hell is my game being demoed in the Netherlands? And it's like, well, that's IGA for you, that's what we do. And that sort of like the feeling that people get the first time that they see that happen, the first time that they see one of their games in a box going to Sweden, or Australia or someplace, it is worth every penny of what we pay to do it, because it's just it's so powerful for them. Because for a lot of these folks, they're not doing this full time, and many of them never will. A lot of them, it's a
Mm-mm.
hobby, it's what they do after their day job, and it's like they can't fathom, like, let me take 2 weeks off from work and go to Essen, stuff like that. So being able to make that accessible for them, even in the smallest way, is just
Yeah,
so
it's
massive.
really interesting. I spoke to Matt Green about this, and there is, because Matt Green won the first UK Games Expo redesign contest, and has gotten multiple games published by multiple companies, but is very much in it as a hobby. Doesn't want to make it a living, and so when their reward for winning the contest was mentorship, and then the mentor was saying, it's not that expensive to go to Nuremberg. You could do it for about 400 quid. The thing was, well, I don't have that. That's a lot of money, and I just can't afford to go there. Sure, I might get even if I'm guaranteed to get my game published, even if I was guaranteed to get my money back, I just can't afford the time, and that's something that I could be spending with my family. And it is really like people have different privileges, people have different affordances. I mean, I don't have a partner like to take care of or any children or any dependents really, so I'm lucky in that way for sure.
And I did want to call one thing out. You know, IGA
Please
can
do.
help with a lot of, we refer to it as sort of being your avatar at a show.
Mm-mm.
I've done pitches to publishers on behalf of members and everything else like that. Um, but one thing that a lot of our members do, much like you, Bez, are where they're a member and also a volunteer. And we, just like, larger publishers who get their own booths at cons, we provide lodging and badges and games and stuff for people that come and demo games for us. And so what a lot of our members will do is come to the show as a volunteer, spend some time, you know, running demos for us, meeting some of their fellow IGA members and meeting us. And then when they're not working in the booth, they're walking around the show pitching their game. And so that's a great way to get your foot in the door, get to a show less expensively, and get a little bit of mentorship. Because a lot of times, if we have a slow period at the booth, we'll just sit and talk with the members, and it's like a 4-day consultation where we talk about all kind of stuff. I remember at Gen Con this past year, um, one of our members was in the booth next to us, and they were doing, like, I was listening to them pitch their game with just when people would walk by in the vendor hall, and their pitch was taking like 5-6 minutes to get through a pitch. And I felt bad because their game is cool looking, it's great, but nobody was sticking around for their pitches, and I could see they were getting really frustrated. And I walked over and I said, "Hey guys, do you have a minute?" And I said, and I gave them a little bit of feedback, and they said, "I don't know that, like, that would be really hard." And I said, "You know what, do me a favor, switch sides with me." And then I went around the table, and I had not sit there for a pitch, I had just listened from the booth next door, and I actually got behind their table and demoed their game to them to show them how to speed it up. And
Mm.
then but that's the kind of thing that we do at cons, and really anywhere we can. And like, I actually, when we left, like, I repackaged their game to make it easier to pull out for a demo. um and they were just like mind blown. And these are the kind
Mm-mm.
of things. It's not that I'm super brilliant, it's not that I'm, I can think of things that nobody else does. It's that all the time that you spend thinking about the next rules for the game, I spend thinking about how do I make demos better. And and every time somebody has a good idea at IGA, they tell me. And so I've just got this bucket of everybody's ideas that I carry around to everybody.
And yeah, if someone wants to sign up to, I mean, presumably this is going to be for people who are able to make their own way to the convention. So it's not like you'll be, hey, Bez, absolutely, I'll help you with your airfare to Gen Con or something crazy like that. But if someone's, you know, a bit closer to Indianapolis or a bit closer to some other USA con that IGA will need people at, I guess, if Origins runs again or other. But what, how would people find out about that specifically? And
So
what is required to get the accommodation and everything?
for conventions, we ask for if you're gonna if you want to get a badge, we ask for 4 hours a day. If you want to get lodging, we ask I think six. Uh, but that's an average. So if you want to, for example, work all day Friday and have Saturday off or something like that, we make arrangements for things. Um, as for knowing what conventions we do, we have an upcoming conventions thing on our website. It's pretty empty right now because the year is just starting and we're figuring out what shows we're going to do this year. And it's a lot of like we've applied for booths and we're waiting to hear if we got one kind of thing. Um, so that'll fill up a little bit probably over the next month or so. And then for any show that you want to volunteer at, you can just go on the Minion dashboard section of our website, and there's a thing that says volunteer at conventions, and you can go say like, I want to volunteer at Gen Con, and it'll ask you like, what's your availability, and you can block off like, I'm doing an event at from 4 to 5 and on Thursday, and I can't be available then, and set it all up. We ask you what kinds of things you're comfortable with, or are you comfortable demoing certain kinds of games, all this sort of thing, and then that all gets transferred to Victoria, who she handles most of our convention logistics, and then from there she takes that and then the people that have signed up for demos and basically matches them up to create our schedule. Um, yeah, and like you said, the only thing we don't cover is we don't we can't like physically get you to the
Mm-mm.
convention center, and you got to eat. But
Yeah. And how do you make sure that people are doing a good job demoing? Because presumably once they're there, they need to know these games to be able to show them off. How do you make sure that these are people who actually know the games and teach them well?
So okay, there's a couple ways we can do that. And a lot of it depends on how much time we get between when we get the game and when we do the demo. Um, there have been a lot of, because of the nature of how everything is cult of the new with us, um, a lot of our demos tend to be scheduled last minute. People are like,
Mm.
"Hey, my game landed last week at the port, and holy cow, I didn't think I was going to have it in time for Gen Con. I'm going to overnight a bunch of them to you." I don't think I've had a major show yet where people have not mailed stock to me at my hotel. Um, and and that can be tough, and we ask people to try not to do that if they can help it, because it does put an unfair expectation on our people to try to be masters of something that they saw yesterday. Um,
Mm-mm.
but like normally when we go to a con, we'll get like an Airbnb that has like a whole bunch of bedrooms, and we'll all sort of stay there. And the night before the show, we'll have a game night in the Airbnb and make sure everybody knows the games thoroughly, and play through it together. Ideally, we get the games a few months in advance, or a few weeks in advance. I mean, and we'll ship the games out to the volunteers and make sure that they have time to do it. We'll give them the contact information for the publisher, and we'll say, hey, if you have any questions, just email Bez, she'll help you. you know and so we have a lot of those options for folks that are like really worried about it. Like for example, we have a couple of people that do like collectible card games through us, and like they want to have like a tournament judge thing where people have to like really really know it.
Mm-mm.
We have a way that you can create a certification program on our website. So you can go in and upload like some videos or a rule book or something and say like, this is the material I expect you to know. And then you build essentially a final exam of questions that people have to answer, and they have to get 100% in order to get that certification. And you can opt in to saying only people who are certified are allowed to demo my game. We don't recommend that for people who are like out who want a demo to promote the game, because it adds a barrier of entry to people being able to have that accessibility. But when we're doing something like if somebody wants us to do like tournaments for prizes or things like that where it's like super critical, that's a great way that we can manage that.
And of course, you can have it in a situation where some of the demos, it doesn't matter so much, but for the one with prizes, okay, the person who's running this needs to know it 100%.
Exactly. And like for a lot of the demos that we run in the vendor halls at conventions, because Bez, I don't know, have you ever done a show in the US?
I've not. I've never been to any US shows. It
So
sounds a lot. I mean, there's a lots of differences with the lottery for acceptance, and obviously the nature of the country, how big it is, makes a massive difference.
so I've never been to a European show, but what I've heard, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that the European shows, and I'm thinking Essen in particular,
Mm.
um, they tend to have sort of larger stalls, and nearly everybody has like their sales and their demo area like right there together. Is that
Yeah,
accurate? So
yeah. You wouldn't have your sales area and your demo area separated. Like that would. That's just a really weird thing to me.
so in the US they do that a lot.
Yeah, it
Um,
seems like a really weird thing to me.
It is but the reason that people do that, I mean, the larger companies that can afford a giant booth, they don't do that. They'll have everything right there together. The problem is, at shows like Gen Con, there's so much demand for space. I mean, we got a 20 by 10 booth in 2015. We were only able to get that because we won a contest. Otherwise, we would have had a 10 by 10. It took us 9 years to get, or 8 years to
And
get
this is
upgraded
feet,
on
not
space.
meters.
Yes, it's a 10 by 10 feet.
So that's
Um,
about 3 by 3 meters, which is really not that big.
it's really not, yeah. And
That's
you
tiny
know,
almost.
and so for 7 years we did Gen Con selling 300 games in a 20 by 10 foot booth. Um, and so there's not a lot of room for a bunch of demo tables there. Um, so what we do in our vendor demos is we tend to do standing elevator pitches where we just explain the game real quick in 60, 90 seconds. Um, and we don't ask people to sit and play a game because, if people sit and play, yes, they get a much better experience. And we do offer that. It just happens out in the main gaming hall. But, I would much rather, if somebody wants us to spend an hour demoing the game, I would rather show it to 500 people than five. Um,
Mm-mm-mm.
and especially if five people sit for a demo, 8 times out of 10, those five people are a group that came to the con together. And that means that even if they love the game, they're only going to buy one copy. And you've spent all that time to sell it. Whereas I wanna be saying like, here's the game, here's how it works, bop bop bop, real fast, real quick. And then if somebody's not interested, they walk away, and I don't waste any more of my time talking to them, and I can grab the next person and continue to do that. But all of this is to say that it's a lot easier to demo a game when you haven't like mastered every little edge case rule when you're doing that, because you're not really
Understood.
talking about the details anyway.
You're just trying to get across the basics of the game. I mean, I think that when I look at the original LDEC game Wibble, that's a really nice game to demo. I think it's super strong because, I mean, when I tell people who come and help me how I want them to demo, how I want them to do this stuff, it's like, firstly, invite the person in, like, give them a greeting, just say hello. That's the key thing. And then the second thing I say is give them a pitch that I ask them to give a pitch for less than 10 seconds. So something like, do you like word games? Or do you want to play a very quick word game? Something like that. It tells you exactly what you're about to do. I don't need more than that to explain the game. And then if that person says no, boom, on to the next person. Or see, well, do you like party games? We've got that. If you don't like that, if you only like long thematic games, well, this stuff is not for you. And try to accelerate that process. After that, sure, it's give them the rules, ideally within about 30 seconds. And then at that point, get them playing is my approach. And within 2 minutes, they should have played a few turns, and then they know whether they want to buy it or not. The other advantage of Wibble is it's a game where anyone can jump in. Sure, if you jump in halfway through, you're going to get fewer points, but you're going to have the same experience, and you're going to still be doing the same things of, okay, I build up my obligations here, and then I've got more letters to deal with until it's excruciatingly difficult, and I reach my limit. Okay, that person reset the round, and after one round, I'm not going to say the game doesn't change because there is some continuity, but you've basically been able to tell whether you like it or not. And I want my demoers to know all the edge cases ideally, but don't tell people them unless they actually come up. I don't even tell people what's a valid word unless they actually ask. Or if someone says Russia, don't know why I said that. If someone says London, I'll say, well, I'll give you the point this turn unless it was going to win in the round, but just for future everyone, you're not allowed to say names of people or places or companies. And that explains it all. And it's definitely a different approach. And I think part of that is because Wibble is so easy to get people into, drop people out of. Sure, the full game might take 10 minutes, but if someone ever plays a full game, I would expect there to be another person like kind of adding them in. Or after like the second round, I'd say, well, if you want to keep playing, I'll be around, I'll guide you, but keep playing yourselves. And then I'll ask other people to join the same group. So within a 10-15 minute space, I'd have multiple people join. And that's the difference between a game like that, a party game where, yes, people can pop in and pop out without affecting the overall thing, and something like Catan, where obviously that would be kind of impossible.
Well, and that is something that a lot of games don't really have the benefit of.
Mm-mm,
Which again is another great reason that why we focus on the vendor pitches. But I
mm-mm,
think and for anybody listening, your comment about starting with a simple question. In I actually have I did a certification for retail sales, and they call that a grabber, and that is always supposed to be that's how you lure people in. And if you think about it, starting off with that question, it it almost demands interaction. um
mm-mm.
if you think about it, Disney made $6 billion asking people, do you want to build a snowman? um so and you can always come up with a fun question, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be directly tied to the game. When I used to demo Underlings of Underwing a lot. It's one of my favorite games, and it's a worker placement game, and the idea behind it is you're trying to hatch dragons of different colors, and you're a little bit like a Pokemon trainer where you manage them. And so, like, you can just ask people, "Hey, do you love dragons?" And everybody will be like, "Well, yeah, of course I love dragons." So, like, this guy here, this is Iggy, and he's the official IGA sales dragon.
Aw, cute.
And so, people will walk by, and I'll walk around the booth and just flap his wings and say hi to people and have him talk to people. And I'll be like, fist bump for the sales dragon. And people will come up and give him a fist bump. And now they're in the booth. And that's half the job. And so that kind of stuff. So this is my little buddy. You'll see he matches our company colors pretty good here. And I bought him at
Mm-mm.
Gen Con last year. So
And like, I've just found that freebies work so well, and I don't want anyone else to start doing this exact pun, but I've got a catalog, by which I mean a picture of a cat on a log, and then I've got it on a sticker. It used to be a white sticker, but then I redid them to make them red because obviously that's going to be the color that I should do. But I people coming by, everyone now says, "Hey, would you like a catalog?" And then people see that, oh, and then that's an invitation to come in and interact a little bit more. It puts a smile on their face, and it's something memorable. And actually, someone that I was playtesting with yesterday said that they saw me at Dragon Meet, and that's why they came as a playtester. So they didn't have their own game; they were just coming in because they saw me at Dragon Meet. They actually won my 2 p.m. event. They won a copy of a game, and they said, "Oh, I really enjoyed it." But at the end of the day, I forgot about the people who didn't give me anything, or I didn't buy anything from, or I didn't get anything from. But anyone who even gave me like a small sticker or something, it doesn't have to be big, then I remembered them. And it's like having ideally a business card that, sure, it has your info, but it should be something fun. It should be something that feels value. And I think the difference between a sticker is it feels entirely of value. Even if you've got like your little reminder, this is stuff by Bez at the bottom, just to remind people who gave it to them, it should be like a fun graphic that's more about them. I don't know what you think about what I'm saying there.
So I think what you're doing is a really great way to approach it. Um, and again, I think that the nature of, and I think I'm thinking primarily about the LDEC here, because like you're not going to invent any new letters anytime soon. Um, so it's a little bit tough for me to recommend what I normally do, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But I think the sticker thing is a great pivot. Um, and like you said, business cards are boring, and they feel very corporate, and nobody wants to feel corporate at a game con. They're there to have fun. Um, and so what I find is, you know, sometimes our members will send us a big box of business cards and they're like, will you please put this out on the table so people can take the business cards? And I'll do it if you ask. But the reality is, if you send me 1,000 business cards, I'm coming home with 960 of them. And,
So
and a
it's
lot
worth
of people,
sending 50.
what? What'd you say?
So it's worth sending you 50.
Maybe. But, the other problem is then our counter just looks like, you spilled a filing cabinet. Um,
Yeah, I get
you
it.
know, so then people started sending us like postcards, like quarter size flyers, for games that are like on Kickstarter or something, and that's better. So we find that like one out of every 50 people will take a business card, maybe one out of every 30 will take one of those flyers. When we started using game playable promo cards, that number went to almost 70% immediately, even if it was a game they don't have, even if it was a game that isn't even available to buy yet, because people see that there's value in it. And a lot of people, like, even if they go home and they don't care about the game at all, what a lot of people will do is they'll go home from a show and then they'll list the promos that they don't want on eBay. And you think, well, geez, I just paid to give something away so it can go on eBay. It's like, yeah. And for 10 cents, you just got an ad on eBay for 2 weeks for your game. Um, and so we always recommend that if you can, if it works for your game, do promo cards, um, because people tend to grab them, people tend to bring them in, and those are the kinds of things that drive interest long term. Because then now the other thing is, I talked at the beginning of the show about how much I'm a completionist. Well, in the same way that it bugs me that I have a game and I don't have the promo, once I have a promo, I feel like I have to get the game. Because I feel like, well, gee, this is a waste. I've got this card taking up, a micrometer of space in my house. That's dumb. Now I need to get a 14-foot box to put it in. I mean, of course I do. So, so
I mean, I oh, I have so many problems with kind of preying upon certain aspects of humanity, but I think that, yeah, hopefully everyone isn't going to actually. I know we make a joke about completionism, and for sure, I want people to pay me money and to buy my stuff, but I really absolutely hope that no one's spending money they don't have. Do you know what I mean? I hope that, I mean, it's less likely with my stuff given that it's relatively inexpensive. And on my Kickstarters, I've now even started doing the subsidized copies where I'm actually losing money on those things because, and other people have started giving me money to subsidize more things where I say, yeah, you can, if you buy a copy for yourself, you can also buy a copy for someone else. and then that gives me the money to subsidize another one. And I'm being surprised by how many people are saying, yeah, I want to help you spread your games to more people. And it's just amazing to see the generosity of people. And but in all sincerity, if you anyone listening to this does feel like they have a problem where it's leaving them with not enough money for their general life to life stuff, I hope that they will get help. And that is the kind of slightly uncomfortable truth that there's this tension between I want people to pay me money, but I want it to be at a level that they can afford. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm. And ultimately, um, everybody kind of has to make their own decisions about what they're gonna do with their situation. And I mean, just like anything else, anything can become addictive and become problematic. But I would also hope that folks, you know, anything that they get hooked on to an unhealthy degree that damages, like it breaks out of the container that it's supposed to be in your life and starts to mess with things it shouldn't, should definitely be in a position that they can get some help to address that. As far as the subsidizing and thing, I also, I think you've been absolutely a leader in that space in the industry, which I take my hat off to you. Well, I metaphorically do, because if I do, it'll mess my headset up. Um,
Thank you.
you know, I also, I really want to call out Doug Lewandowski for that. He does a great thing where most of his games, a lot of them are like print and plays or really like PDF type stuff, and he does like a hardship level that's like, if you can't afford the game, give me $1 and take the game, and no questions asked. And like we talked about with some of your other Kickstarter stuff, that doesn't work for everybody.
Yes.
If you make a $200 miniature game, it's hard to be like, well, if you want to give me $5 for it, that's okay too. Um, but
I mean, I believe that if you're selling 1,000 copies of a $200 game, you can probably still afford to say, I'm going to subsidize 5 of them. And if other people give me more money to subsidize them, then I'll subsidize more copies. I think it's always possible. Sure, it might be a small number. You might say, okay, I'm going to release, let's say you work out you can only do 5, maybe you do all 5 at the start, and frankly, it's going to, even from a cross commercial perspective, it means that those people are going to be backing earlier, which is good for your Kickstarter. Even though at that point you've probably, hopefully, 5 extra people doesn't make that much impact on your algorithm. But I honestly think it's something that every company could afford a small percentage of what they're doing, regardless of the price.
yeah, like I said, it's less about not being able to do it and more about like, you know, if Doug with a PDF, if he does half of his games that way, it doesn't cost him anything.
Correct.
Whereas it would be harder to do something at that scale for, a large expensive game. But you're right.
Mm.
Everybody has some way that they can do that. One of the things that I love to see people do is subsidize, like when they get stuff like ding and dent copies, that like, you know, just give it to somebody. Don't donate it
Mm-mm.
to a game store or a library or someplace where people go publicly play games. Donate it to a school. You know, give it give it to somebody. Use it as a demo copy, because I mean
Mm-mm.
those are going to get beat up anyway, taking them around to shows and everything. And you can subsidize giving it to a volunteer. A lot of our volunteers became volunteers because they wanted to support their gaming habit in a way that wasn't expensive, and so they earn their games through time. And that works if if you have more time than money to burn. That's a great way to go about it.
Well, I think it's been such a great conversation, and we've gone on a lot longer than I usually do because, frankly, it would be unreasonable to ask you. Well, You offered. I didn't explicitly ask, but I'm really appreciative you've gotten up ridiculously early once, and I'm certainly not going to ask you to do it twice, because it's been just such a lovely conversation. And maybe after I stop this show, I'll start a podcast at some point where we can do something at more mutually beneficial time and do it in shorter chunks. Because we could talk, there's so many stories about the um, sorry, I'm looking for my banner because my laptop still hasn't sorted itself out. Um, we could talk about more about demoing, more about what IGA does, more about anything. But is there anything right now that you want to tell everyone?
Um, I want to tell people, first off, as far as getting up early, you're worth it. So don't
Oh
worry about it.
God.
And I didn't get up early to sell IGA. I got up early to talk with my friend. And if along the way some people learned something about IGA, hey, that's cool too. Um, as far as what to sort of leave people with. I normally have this sort of pre-formulated thing that I say, and it kind of feels trite right now. So let me just say this. Um, there's a lot of people in our industry that are discouraged right now.
Hmm.
Um, you know, COVID hit a lot of people hard. Frankly, COVID, not even so much the fact that it shut down stores and it shut down cons and everything else, but it shut down people.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of folks that got really depressed during that time. Hell, I was one of them. And and they started to sort of, when we started to have the shipping crisis, and everything got more expensive and everything, and people started to feel like the that their game was never going to happen, that it was just, it was a lost cause. And to those people, I would say, I hear you and I understand. And yes, it's been hard. And I've spoken to a lot of folks who struggled with it. Um, I've spoken to a lot of folks who didn't make it. That's true. I mean, I can't hide that fact. But I would say, don't give up hope. Um, because this industry, unlike any other that I have seen, helps each other. I mean, IGA couldn't exist in nearly any industry because people would look at it and say, "Well, why do I want to help Bez? She's a competitor." Um, but our world doesn't do that. Our world is here to help you. And that's not. I don't say that because IGA makes money when I help you. I say that because there's a million people out there on Facebook groups and everything else that give of their time. John Gilmore, the designer of Dead of Winter, is fabulous about that stuff. He spends so much time doing it. The late James Matthew was like that, where he did so much time
Rest in
and everything.
peace.
And so there's always help, and there's
And
always
even though the
direction.
Facebook groups that James Maffey sets up, sadly, I think it's Cards and Board Game Designers Guild, it's fallen down to spammers because there wasn't the possibility for someone else to take over and change the things for Facebook. But there are so many things like Senfu and Glim, and oh my gosh, I can't remember the other moderators. They set up another thing to replace it, and there's so many things.
There's
There's
thousands of
the
them.
stuff on Boards Game Geek where people are helping each other. And if you join in one of these contests, people are helping each other. Like the Board Game Design Workshop with Chris. I can't remember their surname, I do apologise. But Board Game Design Workshop with their annual contest. And the
Mhm.
whole point of
There's
that
that.
contest
There's the
is,
tabletop mentorship program that people are doing
yeah,
now, and there's
there's
just
so
there's
many
so
things
much
that you
help.
can get for free. If you have zero money, you can still get so much information. And yeah, parts of this, I'm not going to lie, the reason I started this was because I was struggling to get out of bed during the pandemic. And, well, gosh knows that over the past month, I've kind of been really blooming depressed and sometimes struggled to get out of bed. The fact that I managed to, I mean, I only do this at 10 a.m. UK time, and the fact that I managed to actually have a short 5 minute walk before this was a minor achievement for myself. I felt really good about that. But knowing that I have to be here for 10 a.m., that's a commitment that I stick to, and that's something that kind of keeps me going. And it's like I've had a nice conversation, but at the same time, scan the titles. If you have a question, that's send me your question. If I've already answered it, I'll probably point you to a thing. We watch them on double speed on YouTube. I know I. And if you have a question on something else, then I'll make a new show about it and talk about it for however long it needs to be talked about because we love talking about games. This is our passion, and we are in the business of bringing joy. Just to riff off what you're saying, it's not a utilitarian thing where people shouldn't have too much food. Like if I eat tinned curry from one supermarket, I'm not going to have the tinned curry from the other supermarket because I can't, eat much as I might love tinned curry, I can only have it so many times a day before, it's problematic. I could, frankly, gorge myself excessively in one supermarket, let alone multiple. But the point is that these are clearly competitors, whereas you've made this point, Matt, that people who are really into board games, they'll play something, and if there's multiple games, we'll do different things. And if your game is actually doing something different, then people will want to try your game because it's good, because it's interesting, because people who fall in love with games fall in love with trying new things. And demoing as part of IGA is an opportunity to do a lot more of that. And sure, you need to pay your own way, but then you get new games to play. Anyway, I'm just riffing off what you said, but now I feel I'm excessively rambling again.
Like I said, I'm on the call to talk to you. It's okay. I've heard everything that's in my head. I've already heard. So you know,
So let's move on. I've asked you so many questions. Now's your opportunity to ask me something. What would you like to ask me? Question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way.
what are you going to talk about next week?
Um, Next week, when? I'll say tomorrow I am talking with Matt Green. I'm going to try and get the LDEC Design Contest 2023 guidelines written out, and I'll be discussing them with Matt Green. That's what I'm talking about tomorrow.
Sounds
So,
like a
yeah,
good day.
people want to check that out, check out stuffwithbez.com/streams. And at this point, over to you. What are you up to? You can share button if you want to. Is there something that you want to do, something that you need to do, something that you want to share? Please do. I promise I care. I've got a personal appointment in 90 minutes, so I'm going to get showered and stuff, and yeah, got an hour to get ready because it's less than half an hour away. But yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to. It's a reason to get out the house for a bit and then come back and try and sort out some stuff for Nuremberg is my big priority. Try and actually sort out those meetings. How about you, Matt? How about everyone else, anyone else watching?
Well, for me, I'm gonna, I took some time off for the holidays, which I haven't done in ages, and that was well needed. So I'm gonna spend today kind of catching up on some IGAs, some emails that I owe people. I have a batch of games I need to ship out. I've got a couple of games that I need to go to Norway today. Um, so we're gonna do some of that. And then after that, I don't know. Maybe some PlayStation. I've been thinking about. I've got a couple of solo like escape room games that I got for Christmas that I want to
Nice.
check out. So we'll see how it goes.
That sounds like a lovely day, and I hope you have a wonderful one. And we have, of course, talked about so much. We've, to recap and wrap up before we finish up, we talked about the IGA, how Matt is overworked, the notion of demoing with these 1,100 volunteers, playtesting, a really great thing to do, and maybe via Tabletopia or physically through IGA, talking about walking again and the joy of that, the joy of big boxes and a 15x7, I think Galaxy said, the transatlantic connection, this brilliant thing, the technology that allows us to talk together, Marvel Dice Thrones, recommended podcasts, 99% Invisible. I mean, you already know all the board game podcasts. Valeria, Card Kingdoms, and Underlings of Underwings, the things that really got you, sparked your joy in gaming. We talked about the idea that for starting designers who might want to self-publish, playtest as much as you can, make connections with people, and it's all about making those dreams a reality. Because ask yourself, what is your goal? What is your dream? Sure, your dream might be, okay, ideally, I wouldn't say no to selling 100,000 copies of something self-published, but is it more important for me to do that, or is it more important for me to see people playing them, to have a connection with the people playing them? And you've got to make all these questions yourself, like what is the biggest priority? What's the thing that you really, really want to do? But you talked about consultation, the IGA Lite with the $10 a month, which gives you playtesting and the discounts of the consultation. The Pro with the $30 or $25 per month, depending on if you pay in advance or not, where you can actually sell your games and demo the games and put it into distribution and send it to the shops. We talked about people growing, like the later games, and the fact that IGA is more of a guild. We talked about demo reps being more active, 2020 really having hurt people, shut down people, as you said at the end. The idea of polyhedrals and D4s puncturing a foot, and the rules of the game, Munchkin, Catan, Nuclear War, and finding an ad in Munchkin, which is actually a really nice way to do it, to have an ad in your game saying, hey, join our demo team. That's something that's never considered. I'm going to draw a circle to ponder that. It's like, is that something that's viable for me? It might be. Is it something that's viable for you if you're a publisher? It might be. I don't know. We talked about in 2013 having bought this game, Boss Monster, then reaching out to them saying, hey, can I join your demo team? Okay, well, if you don't have one, can I make your demo team? And then making this thing that started off with Brotherwise and then Doug Lewandowski and then Portal, and managing to have so many members that really make this idea work. Starting off by being outside the ladies' toilets, which sounded like actually a great space for you. Ken Grazier, who I know well from Idol Michael's show, setting up systems in place, demoing things internationally, pitching to publishers or at Gen Con, to being something that you can offer if a publisher's on going to Gen Con. And maybe you're on the other side of the world, maybe you're just on the other side of the country, maybe you just don't have time, and that's something that can be done. Like, if you want to join a con for 4 hours a day, you get tickets. For 6 hours a day, you get the lodging as well, which seems like a really good deal. And then you get this little bit of mentorship as a thing, like Matt's going to be there giving you pointers on how to give better demos. And you'll have this thing in the Airbnb where everyone plays the games together and gets to know each other. And I think that's like one of the big reasons why people say, for me, they keep volunteering, because they enjoy being part of something. And I think that's the really important thing to foster this group spirit. We talked about shipping the games ahead of time to volunteers if you at all can. Having smaller things like here, I think anyone can go to UK Games Expo and say, yeah, I want more space. And we have enough space here. It's just not that big. Like, you can get as much space as you want. If you said, hey, I want a 2x8 meter space, I've never been there before, well, I'd say, like, UK Games Expo, actually, as an aside, they're really good, because the first time you exhibit, they give you a reduction if you get to smaller space, either 3x4 or smaller. And it's like, hey, we want more indie people to come here. We will give you a big discount on your first year just to help get you started, which is really nice. But it feels like US places, I don't know whether it's because they've reached the capacity of their, Gen Con certainly reached capacity of what it can structurally hold, but it's now gotten to the point where people are having to have raffles and apply to have a place, which isn't always great. but you can at least be guaranteed that someone will be able to walk up to a vendor place and buy your game. Or if you've got a new game, it'll be on a table. And we talked about promo cards being a great idea because it can get you an ad on eBay, which is not a perspective I'd ever considered before. We talked about the idea of addiction and COVID shutting down people and us all being in it together. It's been an absolutely delightful conversation, and thank you so much for being here. Um, if people want to check me out, I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places, and um, I do apologize, my laptop still hasn't turned back on. But if people want to check you out, how can people find the Indie Game Alliance?
The easiest way is indiegamealliance.com. All of our social medias are at the bottom. We're Indie Game Alliance on basically every social media platform except Twitter because it's too long. We're Indie Game Allies there. You can also go to indiegamealliance.com/Discord to get an invite to our Discord server. And, we have folks that come in and ask questions and stuff all the time. Bez, I hope you wrote all that stuff down because like that memory would be amazing otherwise. Okay. I was going to say like, oh my goodness. But,
I do not have an eidetic memory, no. It was like 75% of an A4 sheets of paper. Yeah, that's one of my starting things. I'm proud of my recaps, but I hope that everyone out there spread the word, not just of this show, but of the IGA, because it's doing great stuff. And I'm going to make a point of, thinking about what you said about the correct time of, okay, people are happy now with something, go off and demo it. Because it's just, I love what you're doing, and thank you to everyone who's been watching. I see there's a bunch of lurkers, which is cool. If you're just wanting to listen to in the background, I really appreciate you listening, and everyone who's thrown in comments or questions, and of course, most importantly, Matt, thank you for being here, and thank you for everything you're doing in the industry.
well, I love doing what I do. Thank you for doing this and for inviting me on. It's a great way to start the weekend, getting to talk about things that make us happy, make us fun, and getting to do it with somebody that's been my friend for apparently almost 7 years now. Um, so,
For now, I think there's only one thing left to say, which is, as always, bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song to do. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.